Camilo.
Professor O'Kane.
How are you, man?
Good, man. This is the first time I've called you Professor O'Kane.
That's okay. That's okay.
That
checks in the mail.
That's O'Kane.
We'll fix this in the edit.
In the post.
In post. So I've been wanting to do this interview for a long time, and I want to say that you're underrated, but you'd have to know who you are to be underrated. And those of us who know you overrate you.
I got lost already. Under, over.
Camilo, you're an amazing guitarist, and I don't believe I've ever told you that before, but you're way more than a guitarist. You're an incredible musician, producer, arranger, hogger of many solos, and player of many notes. And I want other people to not only know about you and hear what you can do on the instrument, but I know that there's a lot that you have to teach us. I know you've taught me a lot. You've inspired me a great deal. And there's a lot of people who want to be able to get to the heights that you've achieved and become a session player or become a touring musician or a guitarist with great chops, great ears, and the list goes on and on. These are all things that you've accomplished, and I just want to find out about that, pick your brain, and get some hacks into how you've achieved what you've achieved.
Are you sure you got the right guy, man?
Actually, I don't think so. I don't think that it's important to know, where you were born or what color your first guitar was, but I think that one thing that we can start off, and I start off asking everybody this, is, did you go to music school?
I did. I didn't finish. I went to Miami Dade, actually, and then
community college.
Yeah. I don't know the difference. That should tell you already everything. But I like the teachers there. Mitch and Tom were my teachers. You know them. Well, for the viewers, Tom Lippincott and Mitch Farber. Mm-hmm. And I loved their playing. I had seen them. I forgot where. I don't know if maybe they came to my high school, or maybe there was like an open somewhere. I saw them before finishing high school, and I was really impressed by their playing. And then I was like, man, I want to study with those guys. And then, of course, the idea was, I'm going to do the 2 years here, and then I'm going to go to UM, But then I had a scholarship, and then I didn't take any academics, so I only took music classes. And then eventually they told me, you got to stop taking music classes and do your academics. And then at that point, I was like, can I curse on your podcast? On your I said,
you can try. I can always
curse word this. I'm out of here. And then at the same time, I was starting to gig around, and I got on my first, quote unquote, major artist. So then I just dropped out, and then I was always thinking I'll go back and finish, and then I never did.
So you were already able to play by the time you got to Miami Dade, or were you starting off just?
Oh no, yeah, my dad was a musician, so I played piano when I was little, and then in high school I picked up guitar. So I was taking classes. Do you know this guy Mario Smith? He's actually a sax player.
Oh yes, I've gigged with him before.
Yeah. So ago. Mario Smith was actually the guitar teacher at my high school. Right. And he kind of learned. It was one of those things. I'm assuming that he probably taught band or saxophone or something, and they probably scrapped this program, and he was like, "Wait, I know a little guitar," so he took over the guitar program, sort of thing. But it was one of those things where he knew he couldn't teach me anything after like the second year, because I also had a private teacher. So long story short, by the time I got to college, yeah, I could already play, Iron Maiden and Yngwie Malmsteen and stuff like that, but I didn't know any jazz at all. So college was mostly jazz.
So you were already used to working on your technique.
Yeah. I started off, I don't know. I guess maybe that's a common thing, but as a beginner, I was always attracted to chops. So I didn't care.
You're still a beginner, is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah. I still like chops.
Right. And then, so do you think that it's important for a session player or somebody who's aspiring to be a session player or a touring artist to go to music school?
I think, and for I guess for the viewers of this, you actually made a really good video about music school that I really enjoyed. So it's a shameless plug. So you put that on my check too,
Yes.
And
I'll put the link right.
Exactly. But that was a great video, man, because you asked a lot of, people that you asked people that I work with and people that I looked up to, like Dan Warner, who passed away, but he was like the session guy in Florida, South Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And I never went to school, so of course it was always in the back of my head, like, man, should I have finished school? Like, should I go back to school? And I actually had people that I was working with that would tell me, man, you should go back and like get your master's, blah 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 blah. And then, but anyway, to answer your question, I think the people that you meet in school, I think that's really, I don't want to say that's the only thing that's worth it, because of course you'll learn. But from what I've seen, I've seen a lot of people that went to school and then they got out of school and then they're like, now what? I have this degree, but now what? But for example, in Dan Warner's case, it's like Dan Warner, Lee Levin, all of those guys who were like the big session guys here in like the 90s and early 2000s, and those guys all met in school, you know what I mean? And I'm not sure that maybe what they learn in school musically is something that they couldn't have learned had they not gone to school. But what's for sure is that those three guys met in school, and then they kind of really built a thing down here for the Latin industry. So I don't regret not finishing school. I just think if you are going to go to school, just keep in mind that that's probably the better thing to do, to just kind of surround yourself and meet everybody you can, and try to keep track of those people as they leave school, because those are the people that maybe might call you for a gig later, or maybe the guy that was the keyboard player that was not that good becomes a producer and or an engineer or something and recommends you for something, So I think that's really the most important thing about school. And then of course, I learned a lot from Tom Lippincott and Mitch Farber. So musically, but could I have learned that stuff outside? Probably, especially nowadays with YouTube. So yeah.
Well, something happened to your playing between the time that you went to Miami-Dade Community College and now, and it's like you just went. It was just a phenomenal increase in skill. You've obviously done tons of work. I'm not talking about doing records and that kind of thing, but I know that you're an incessant researcher and listener. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I've always said that I was about to curse again on you. I've always felt I'm a really bad teacher, right? And I've always been able to identify when somebody's a really good teacher. Like you, I think you're a great teacher, right? Because a great teacher, like, I can only teach somebody something if they had the same struggles that I had, or if they're kind of like already intermediate, but I can't teach like a beginner, But so I felt like Tom Lippincott was a really good teacher. And one of the things that I think that was really valuable that he taught me is he taught me how to teach myself, I guess, in a way. So a lot of the things that he taught me in school, I wasn't really getting them at the time, and then I finished school and left school, and then I could still go back to things that he had taught me and I could break music down using kind of methods he taught me and things like that, you know. So, and then, you know, when I got out of school, I was like 100% the jazz guy, you know. And then we all know very well those guys don't really do well in a pop gig, you know.
Mhm.
It's a different world. Even though at first you kind of have to, you know, it's normal for the jazz school guys to look down on pop and I mean, of course, there's a lot of crappy pop music and everything, but to look down on a pop gig or whatever. But it takes it's a different type of muscle playing that stuff, because musically it's easier. But, you know, do you have the right gear? Are you playing in the right spots? You know, are you doing a fill when the keyboard player is doing a fill? Like, it's other things that you have to think about, you know? So, even though I got out of school already, I guess, an okay jazz guy, fusion, whatever, I still had a lot to learn about, like, just, for example, just playing in the pocket with a band, or learning how to lock in with a bass player and a drummer. And that stuff I didn't learn in school, you know?
How did you learn it?
I was thrown into I was like playing in a top 40 band, and luckily a lot of those guys were like guys, and there was really good musicians. I mean, the keyboard player in that band, his name is Brian Wolf. He moved to I think he lives in San Diego now or something, but he's like an incredible piano player, sax player, drummer, you know, and I would hang with him a lot. So I think it's one of those things where, like, you don't know that you're doing something wrong until somebody tells you, or you hear yourself in a recording or something, you know. And I didn't know that I had a terrible pocket until I started to ask those guys, "Hey man, you know, what do you recommend?" He's like, "Well, you know, you're rushing or whatever." So, you know, learning a lot of that top 40 stuff and trying to learn the parts, I always would try to learn stuff like the record, you know, and try to copy the sounds as much as I could, even if the gig wasn't worth it or it wasn't paying off. I would think of it like I'm learning something that I can then apply to whatever else I'm going to do afterwards, you know.
But if somebody doesn't have access to being in a top 40 band, especially now with the well, I don't know how it is where everybody lives, but in certain places there are not a lot of live playing opportunities. So if somebody doesn't have the opportunity to be playing in a top 40 band, how do they learn? How would you suggest they learn that kind of thing? Playing in the pocket, playing with the right sound, playing in the right spots.
I mean, that's a good question, man. I have a podcast with a friend of mine. His name is Julian, and he moved here from Colombia kind of later in his life, and he said it was a big culture shock coming here and playing with like R&B guys, you know, because I guess at the time in Colombia there weren't guys that could play R&B with like a solid pocket and stuff like that. And he said it was really intimidating to all of a sudden sitting with people. So I totally understand the idea of like people maybe being somewhere where maybe there isn't that level of musicianship that's going to push you and stuff like that. But I would say we're closer together now with the internet. So I think, you know, it's kind of like a very, we're all very conscious and insecure with our musicianship at many stages of our lives, but especially when we're kind of beginners. But I think it's, if you can kind of almost like join a support group, you know, of guitar players that you can be like, man, what do you think of this? Hey, what do you think of this? And just like open that door where you can be approached and somebody can tell you, hey, you're rushing, or and take it like constructive criticism, you know. I think that would be the way. And I mean, it almost feels like we're in a different era now, because when I was kind of growing up, or maybe I don't know if maybe I was just listening to the wrong stuff, but it felt like the guitar gods were what everybody wanted to be, like Steve Vai, Satriani, Eric Johnson. I mean, now you have guys like Mark Lettieri and Corey Wong, which are more like rhythm players, and those guys are more at the forefront. You know what I mean? Like if I would have, I mean, I remember the first time I heard Ross Bolton. Remember Ross Bolton? Mm-hmm. And then, you know, for the people that don't know Ross Bolton, he was a guy in L.A., but he played with like Al Jarreau and all those guys, and he had a funk guitar instructional video. And the first time I heard that stuff, I was like, man, this is so cool, you know? Like, I never thought rhythm guitar was cool until I heard something like that. And then now I think we're at a point where, like, those guys that are, like, rhythm guitar players are a little bit more at the forefront. Like Guitar God, you know, pedal steel, whatever. But, yeah, I think especially when it comes to feel, it's hard for you to know if your feel sucks unless you, like, really critically listen back to recordings of yourself, or if other people tell you, you know, because sometimes you don't know when you're rushing, or you don't know what it's supposed to feel like when you're, like, really in the pocket, you know. It's hard to know at first until somebody tells you, you know.
Now, looks matter. This has nothing to do with gaining playing experience, but has everything to do with, like, you are, it looks like the guitar Moses parted the seas and you're in the center of it right now. You know, because so I know that being a session player, clients who know nothing about music, or nothing, I guess maybe that's stretching it, but they know very little, let's say, but they do know that if you have a studio filled with stuff, that somehow you're better. So how important do you think looks are, the looks of your studio, that it's filled to the brim with stuff, matter in getting hired?
Well, okay, let's start with the first thing. Like, do you need all this stuff to be a session guitar player? No, not at all. You know, I think you could be with maybe a couple acoustic guitars and a couple electric guitars. You can get it done. Most things you can get done. But I mean, of course, people like, you know, it's like I don't know. It's like if I'm a dentist, right? And then it's like if you're gonna go to a dentist's house, and then he's like, oh yeah, step into my office, and it's like in his bedroom, and he doesn't have any, you know, it doesn't look like a dentist's office. You're gonna be like, man, do I trust this guy? You know what I mean? So I mean, of course, I love gear for sure, and I try to buy things that are different. I try not to have too much of the same stuff, so I do like it, but. I mean, sure, I would assume there's got to be an appeal to it from somebody that... I mean, there's a lot of times when people come here and they don't know what they want in their song. And I'll be like, hey, what do you think about this? And I'll just pick up, you know, a dulcimer. They're like, oh, that's awesome. Yeah, put that, you know. Or a mandolin. And they didn't know that they wanted a mandolin before they heard it a second ago. You know what I mean? So a lot of times having those tools available, it's almost like just... more colors to paint with, sort of thing, you know what I mean?
Right. And they see you as having, it looks like you're into what you're doing. I mean, I hate to say that looks matter, but yeah.
I thought you were gonna say looks matter, like I was gonna say that's why I'm a session guy, because I'm not a good looking guy to be on stage, you know.
Okay, so we're gonna jump to another topic. You play the Latin Grammys. That's a high pressure gig where you have to play many different pieces of music. What's that like, and how do you get a gig like that?
So, ironically, there wasn't a house band for the Latin Grammys until the pandemic. Like, the reason we even started was because of the pandemic. They wanted to have the Latin Grammys anyway in 2020, and they didn't want to have 100 different bands in the building, so they decided to make a house band that year. And then, for obvious reasons, probably financial reasons, they decided, hey, this is a good idea, and they just kept us every year since, you know. But I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing because we don't know anything. Like we'll usually get the call in the summer, like if we know, okay, well, you guys, we got rehired, we're on. But until the artist nominations come out, because the way they pick who's performing is whoever gets nominated performs, right? So only the people that are nominated that year get to perform. So until they announce the nominations, we don't know who's going to be invited to perform. And then until they don't know who's going to be invited to perform, they don't know what songs those people are going to pick, you know? So it takes a little while until we actually from the time that we get called and we're like, okay, you're on the gig, it's a while until we get the songs. Usually we probably don't really have everything until like maybe 2 weeks before, and stuff still changes, because a lot of times these artists, it's a song that got nominated that they went in and sang in 4 hours, but they've never sang it live, So now they rehearsed it and they're like, oh shit, this thing overlaps with this thing, so now we're gonna have to add a break. So there's still stuff changing even right up to the rehearsals, So I think a lot of it is just, well, being a good hang and then just being ready for whatever they throw at you, But, this year, luckily, it's going to be in Miami, so we have the luxury of pulling more gear if we need to. But last year it was in Spain, So we needed to know, it's like, oh, guys, what do you guys want for your backline? And it's like, well, what are we playing, We didn't know what songs we were playing, and then the backline company is like, hey, we got to lock in the backline. So it's like, I don't know. Just give me one of everything, and then I guess we'll decide when we get there what we're actually going to need. So it's very up in the air, but, at the end of the day, we're just playing the record sort of thing, The music directors, Lee Levin and Doug Emery, they do make arrangements of those songs, and they have to be approved by the artists before they get to us, But essentially, we get the recording, and we actually record the version. So when they make the arrangement, they make like a, I guess, programmed arrangement, and once it gets approved, then we record it, just so they can have it as a backup for whatever reason, and then that's what we end up playing at the rehearsals, I'm trying to think of, there's artists that, of course, are super easy, and we get there and we run it, it's perfect, they love it. And then, of course, there's artists that we get there and, they changed the key, or they changed their mind, or now they're going to have a feature, and it's, they don't realize all the stuff that it takes for them to change their mind,
Right.
But,
right.
Musically, it's not very challenging, I guess. But you do have to show up and play the right tones that are on the record, because the artists want to hear what's on the record, They don't care if you're bringing a Bogner or a Dumble, or if you have a 59 Les Paul. They just want to hear what they know to be their song,
Now, you've told me that you're not a great reader. So do they... are you learning most of this by ear, or are you reading charts?
So
trying to read charts.
I would say I'm not a great sight reader, but
okay.
If I have to read stuff, I'll probably be okay for that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Because usually today's music is not very challenging to read. Let's say, but we get it far enough in advance, and I've always been, like one of the things about, I guess, growing up in Miami is I've had the chance to play in a lot of black churches, and man, black musicians don't read, and they memorize all these songs, and a lot of times I had a couple steady gigs in like black churches where the music was like super hard, it was like electric band type of stuff, and these guys would just memorize it, and I would be the only idiot there writing all this stuff out, and so I learned to kind of memorize things quickly, So, you said you started piano as a young child. Did you develop perfect pitch? No, I don't have perfect pitch, but I have a good ear. I can usually, if I get it when I get a song to record, I'll like one time running through it, I'll write out the chords. I'm quick at hearing things. I have a good ear, I guess, good relative pitch, but nowhere near perfect.
Right, but if you're driving to a gig and there's a song that you don't know that somebody give you a recording of, you could pretty much determine, one goes to 6, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I use the number system, I think, or I try to relate it to something in my mind. Like if I'm notoriously known for not checking out the music in advance. Actually, Pete Wallace says I'm the best guy he's ever seen at faking a song I don't know. But usually I'll just think in my head, okay, the pre-chorus is 6/4 1/5, and the chord, and then if there's a melody, I'll think, oh, it sounds a little bit like I don't know, Don't Stop Believing, or it sounds a little bit like, I'll try to relate it to things that I do know, so that way, I mean,
That's a cool trick. That's a cool trick.
I write charts, you know. If I have to learn something, I'll write the charts, but I end up not looking at them. But I think also writing it helps you kind of engrave it a little bit.
Now, something that you've done that a lot of people don't do is you've become a good guitar tech. You repair your own instruments, you change your own pickups, you do your own fret jobs. You are very good with the technical aspect of the computer. In other words, you understand plugins, you understand all of this routing stuff. It's not like you're using your DAW in a superficial way.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, you're also a great jazz player, great fusion player. I think you're one of the best session players alive right now that's doing session work. How the F do you do all this stuff?
Man, that's quite an overstatement. But I mean, I guess I was lucky that I learned all that jazz stuff in school, because I mean, I don't know that I've gotten better at it since then. I mean, other things have gotten better, I guess, my time or whatever. I try to work on things like that. But I guess with the same intensity that I dove into the jazz stuff, I tried to dive into like engineering or tech stuff or whatever, you know. And then I always ask around, you know, if I'm doing a session in Criteria or something. I guess it requires a curious mind, you know, because not everybody wonders about that stuff, and that's totally cool. Like, not everybody wants to know like how to change your pickups or how to work a fractal, or how to, you know, why does this speaker sound like. Not everybody wants to know about that stuff, but I do. So
I mean, I just heard you post that thing where you recreated one of Jeff Lynne's guitar. I don't want to say a guitar arrangement, because it's not a guitar arrangement, but it's like the guitar parts of something from the Traveling Wilburys.
Yeah.
Who does that?
So that was okay. So that was a guy.
That's just an example of like it seems like you're pretty much doing this every waking hour, aside from spending time with your wife and child.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think part of it also is I don't want to stay in the same thing. You know what I mean? Maybe that's why I also buy guitars or try new, because I don't want to, like, I don't know, I don't want to be known as the guy that, hey, I'm going to go for this guy and he's just going to, you know, double the acoustic guitars on the verse and double power chords on the chord. Like, I don't want to fall into a formula of anything, you know? So any chance that I can learn something new and try it out. And it just so happened that I was watching the Traveling Wilburys documentary, you know? And they were talking about that, how they went to Dave Stewart's house and how they recorded. And I was like, man, it would be really cool. So I had it in the back of my mind, like, damn, if I can find one song that I can do this on. And then that one song came along, and I was like, all right, I got to try it on this one. And then the artist loved it, you know? But it was cool also just for me to geek out, because I could have probably just, you know, recorded the acoustic guitar left and acoustic guitar right and sent it, and it probably would have been fine and it would have been released. And it's not like it's gonna make it or break it for the song, but it'll just be another little ear candy for it, you know. I guess I did it for me mostly.
You're so selfish. You told me that predominantly you're using the Axe effects.
So I mean, I have the Fractal, which I love, and I used the Fractal Live as well. But I've been using this Red 7 D100 pre a lot. It's like a preamp, you know, kind of like in the old school way of a preamp, like those, you know, whatever. But I have all the amps hooked up already too. But yeah, I mean, ultimately everything goes through the Fractal for the impulse responses, and then I have a chain that goes through effects as well.
Oh, okay.
But it's a little bit of everything, yeah.
Does that mean that somebody trying to become a session guitarist needs to have all of this stuff?
No, not at all. Actually, I think the most important thing is just if you know what it's supposed to sound like, then there's many ways of getting there, you know? So I think if somebody's a beginner, though, I would suggest maybe starting out with getting an amp and a pedal board just so they can understand what it's supposed to sound like. You know what I mean? Like just what a you know, I don't know, a deluxe reverb or an AC30, AC15, whatever, and then just trying out different pedals and kind of understanding. And then again, I mean, it doesn't have to be the technical side of things, because at the end of the day, your ear's the judge, right? I mean, you don't have to know the difference between the British sound and the American sound, or a Plexi and a JTM 45. What's the difference? I mean, I like that stuff, so I've researched it. But I know a lot of people that don't care for that stuff. You know what I mean? But I think it's important to know what the real thing is supposed to feel like. This is still talking about music here. What the real thing is supposed to feel like, you know, just like pedals, or the way that things feel like they compress a pedal versus like amp distortion versus. And then once you kind of have a good foundation of that, then it's fine to try to replicate it. I mean, there's enough software out there, or units out there, you know, like Quad Cortex or Tonex or Helix or Fractal. And yeah, and then trying to emulate those sounds then in the box, if that's what you want to do, you know?
Do you remember when I asked you about technique, and I said, or I wasn't asking you about technique, I was just making a comment, and I said, you know, all of this work for being able to play, you know, 40 notes in 3 seconds, is it even worth it? Like, I think we've all been on a gig where we've tried to play something very fast. We've practiced it before the gig. We play it on the gig. We look out, and nobody gives an F about it.
Yep, it happens.
So do you think it's important in your work, as far as being an employable guitarist, to have those kind of chops? I mean, to have like very good technique, or do you think that that's not really that important?
I mean, for what I do as a session musician, I think the more stuff you can do, the better, you know? It's not, I mean, if you look at history, it's not necessarily that all the session guys ever have been incredible chop monsters, you know what I mean? But, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think anybody wants to be a session musician forever, you know what I mean? I don't think I learned chops so I could apply them in sessions necessarily. You know what I mean? I think I've always just learned things that I like for me, and then it just so happened that they work in certain situations. And of course, I've learned a lot of things that don't work in any situation, as you can imagine.
Oh, most of your videos.
Exactly. To see more of that, check out.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we'll have links everywhere for that.
But I mean, come on. If you sit there, do you sit there and think, you know what? I don't want to play this jazz stuff anymore. Let me play like B.B. King. No, right? I mean, unless that's how you want to play, you sit there and, oh yeah, this is how I play because I'm enjoying it, you know? But if you sit there and you enjoy shredding, you know, I don't know, half whole diminished, then that's fine, you know, as long as you're having fun. Ultimately, I think whatever you do, it's got to be fun, you know?
How much time are you putting into keeping up your technique?
I mean, I'm trying like as much as I can to do it as much as I can. So like sometimes more often than not, if I'm recording over somebody's track and I finish like a power chord track or whatever, my ADD will kick in and I'll start noodling over their track. I'm not recording anything, of course, but you know, today, for example, I sat in and I was just like playing over Humpty Dumpty, you know, Chick Corea. Just because I was like, man, I feel like I should keep this up. You know what I mean? I don't need to. I rarely am ever in a situation where that's needed. But for my own peace of mind, like I don't know. It's not like I go to a jazz jam and I need to keep it up for my Monday jazz jam, but
right.
But you don't need it. I know a lot of session guys that are not jazz guys or don't know anything about jazz or don't know anything about.
You need to keep it up for the next time we do that Biltmore gig.
Exactly. Yeah. For our next, St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah. Well, Camilo, you really have given us a lot of inspiration. I mean, not only with your playing, but I think the idea of pursuing what you like is a very inspiring way to come at music. And because a lot of times we end up doing what we have to do, and that's a real downer a lot of times, especially over time. And it's very easy to get lost and lose what it is that you actually like, what inspires you, or what has inspired you in the past. And that's one of the things that I think is so admirable about you, is that it doesn't matter how many boleros you're playing over, or not playing over, but having to create tracks for, or how many ballads you're having to do, or the crappy gigs. You are always working to push yourself forward, and I think that you're exemplary in that regard. And also, all the things that you can do is really, you raise the bar for everybody. Because one guy might be good at repairing guitars, but can't do any of the other stuff that you do. Or somebody might be a great player, but they can't play sessions and create stuff that people like. And I think that that's very inspirational. And I really appreciate you and all of your inspiration.
Man, thanks for that. And let me just be clear, I'm not a great repair guy anyway. But if I had all these guitars and I had to take them to a repair guy, I would be broke. And I used to take them to a repair guy, actually Albert, whom we both know, who's fantastic. But in the pandemic, we couldn't go anywhere, and I had to set up my guitars, So I just went to YouTube University of guitar setupery. So that's it. Yep.
So guys, follow Camilo. The links are in the description. It's very worth your time to do so, and stay inspired. And thanks so much, Camilo. Thanks for spending time with us.
Yeah, man. And thanks for having me. And I mean, I hope if this inspires anybody, feel free to write to me and ask me whatever. I'm open to answer whatever, if it helps.
Fantastic. Mind yourself. Take care.
All right, man. Laters.